we've chosen to do this on what's definitely got to be the busiest day in any kosher restaurant, any family kosher restaurant, which is Friday afternoon, because tonight is Shabbos, the beginning of the Sabbath, and the mothers don't want to set up, feed their kids at home. In fact, they've probably already got the table set up for the Sabbath meal tonight. So they pick up the kids from school, take everybody to the pizza shop. This is a very nice restaurant. You mentioned when you first came in, this seems to be new. This is what our community in Passaic has done over the last 30 years, and I've been here for about 30 years, is take what had been, actually historically, 100 years ago, Passaic was one of the great Orthodox Jewish cities in America. But then basically almost all the Jews left. But in the 80s, there was a renaissance, and it became basically gentrified. This part of Passaic, which is called Passaic Park, and then the neighboring city of Clifton, where I live, Jews who mostly worked in the city came back, started buying houses, building houses, and we've reached a critical mass now where a restaurant like this one and a shopping center like this one, which is, and this is, if you have a chance when you leave, you should walk through and see the different kinds of stores here. This is a Judaica store, which sells all kinds of Jewish books and Jewish household items. Clothing stores for women that specialize in modest fashions. Clothing stores for men, white shirts and dark suits. Hats.
Huge variety.
Yeah, it's true. Not there's no tattoo parlor here. There's no hookah shop. But thank God, things are cooking.
What's up with you?
You're so busy. I'm so jealous. I mean, you managed to avoid having to make a real living. Just doing this social media stuff. Are you going to write another book? Are you writing another book?
I am. I started writing it now. I got convinced by people not to self-publish it, but try to pitch it.
Oh yeah, what did they tell you? Because you're already established. And you're thinking, well, gosh, I'm already established. Why do I want to give away such a large percentage of the revenue? But their response to you is what?
There's a bit of a status when it comes to publishing, but then there's also the advance. So that part can play into it. Depending on the publisher, there could be some marketing advantages. I think it depends.
I have an agent who wants me to write a book. It seems Ron Coleman should be full of books. But the first book I have to write is going to be about the Slants case, the Supreme Court case that I did. And the way I'm going to do it, I have to do it because it's the story, this has turned out to be really labor intensive. I'm going back over the years and years of blog posts that led to me getting the case, and in which I reported the progress of the case and debated the issues and spoke around the country about the case.
Right.
And then I'm going to connect them with some kind of editorial narrative. And first of all, you give up so much when you take blog posts and put them into a book, because I was always a very heavy linker in blog posts. And it's a very big part of the presentation, what I'm linking to. You lose that. But the main reason that I feel I have to do it this way is that there are going to be all these copyright clearances that I, as a copyright lawyer, know I don't have to worry about, but that publishers are just not going to be able to live with it. So I'm going to do the first one myself.
Okay.
Maybe you'll publish it for me. No, but you don't want the aggravation either. That's why I asked you, because I'm looking at that stuff too. But it's really exciting seeing what you're one of those people who contacted me about being on my podcast, which I am really cool with.
Usually it's the other way around?
And it's usually me chasing after people.
No, There's something, if I'm honest, there's something endearing about you.
Oh, well, please be honest. We always tell our witnesses, when we're preparing a witness for a trial or a deposition, that's one of the phrases we tell them not to use.
Endearing?
No. Believe me, if all those endearing... No. To be honest. Because then it makes it sound like everything else you said wasn't honest.
That's a good point.
It's kind of a shtick, but you're softening the blow, saying something nice about me. I appreciate it.
No, and then of course when I do the podcast, I like talking to you, and you have a sense of humor. I like anybody with a sense of humor who doesn't take themselves too seriously.
You know what's interesting to me? Until the woke era, sorry for using that overused term, but it just does encapsulate the moment. Until the woke era, I thought of black people as having great senses of humor. And whenever people would say to me, I don't know, black people are smart, I said, don't tell me people with a good sense of humor are smart. And I've never met a black person who didn't have a very good sense of humor and always get where I was coming from. But now everyone, liberal scolds don't like joking about things. But thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that when I was growing up, I used to think my father, of blessed memory, was the funniest guy in the world. But of course, it was because he made all these dad jokes, and I was a little kid, and that's what dad jokes are meant for little kids. He was such a great dad. We talked about dads, about your fatherhood experience. Oh my. You see, they're getting the real Ron Coleman experience. There's no way you can have a meal with... I need to take... Well, my problem is I'm always eating dirty food like this.
Right.
If I had a nice fish like you. But enough about me. What were you about to say? Something about... I mentioned fatherhood.
No, that's awesome. Actually, my mother was the one who got me into comedy. The first time I went to a comedy club, I was underage, but they let me in. But the first time I went to a comedy club, my mom took me. I don't remember who the comedians were, but I still remember going. My mom used to listen to Howard Stern, and I would listen to it too. I was a teenager.
So this would be in the 90s? When he was on regular radio?
When he was on celestial radio. And then I remember, was it terrestrial? Terrestrial, I guess it's celestial. Jesus. When he was on, let me see.
The Fan, right?
No, the Rock.
K-Rock.
K-Rock. He was on K-Rock. But at night, they would have the E episodes of like the craziest parts, and you would get to see what you couldn't see on the radio. So my mom got me into that type of stuff. And my mom has a sense of humor as well. But I think, when I think about it, I think we have similar senses of humor. She's occasionally serious, but as she's gotten older, she's become less serious.
My mother also. Well, first of all, you're out of the house. I mean, once your kids are up and out, you have so much less to worry about. You can actually live your own life. One of the things about a community like this is that people spend their entire lives around young children. Either they're having children into their 40s, or they're already having their grandchildren around. I have one of the things that the vast majority of the families in this community have in common is a commitment to regular Torah study. So I have a study partner. The Aramaic word is chavrusa, who I've been studying with almost every morning for about 30 years. And he has a PhD in finance from Columbia. He's a professor at Touro College. And as long as I've known him, there have been little children around his feet. He has a large family, and they in turn have large families. And you spend your entire life with children and involve, I think a lot of the people who have taken cultural leadership in this country don't have children, and if they do, they're not raising them. If you have children, you're not going to go into this nihilistic worldview that has become so dominant.
Nihilism is like, that's the thing I bring up all the time. Everybody seems so pessimistic. It's like, I try to think about, there will never be a perfect society. And actually humans would reject a perfect society. I think the Matrix is absolutely right. The architect said, we tried to make a perfect society, you guys rejected it. I 100% believe that.
Well, that's what the story of the fall is.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is, there is progress. I think that's the thing that matters. Is there progress? Because I know I'd rather live now than, let's say, the 1880s, right? Just for many different things and conveniences and progress has been made.
There is this strong inclination, maybe less so among black people, but a lot of people I have heard say, I was born in the wrong time. I should have really lived in the 40s. That was really my time. I would have been, because there were all these aspects of dignity, and there were many things about it that retrospectively look like a better way of life. Mm-hmm. And let's put aside the technological and convenience aspects of even being born when our parents were.
Right. Being
black or being Jewish in the 40s wasn't like being Jewish in 2024 and being black. You were different. Mm-hmm. And you didn't have things like podcasts and documentaries and self-published books by which you could establish your own, channel. The gatekeeping was predominant in every aspect of the world, including work,
right.
Including unions. That doesn't mean, however, that modernity necessarily is ideal. Right. No one would say that either.
Listen, there are areas where it's like clearly we could do better.
Oh gosh.
Like I do wish that we had more modesty, but because you'll see, and my wife does this sometimes. We'll watch like a really old, random film of people walking down the street in the 1940s, and everyone's wearing a suit, right?
Famous pictures from Ebbets Field. It's Ebbets Field, the Brooklyn Bums. They were like the blue-collar, baseball team. Mm-hmm. And people are coming in, and of course it's a day game, so if you're there, you have to have some excuse, but everyone is wearing the clothes that they would wear to work, mm-hmm. which would be suit, and even working class people. I mean, this is a topic I've discussed many, many times, including with my friend O.W. Root. Mm-hmm. He's made a whole brand and channel out of that. People are really missing out, and that is, I think, one of the nice things about this community. Also, you see how all the men and women are dressed here. Mm-hmm. It comes at something of a cost if you're, a sex symbol like me, and you're losing out the opportunity to flash those pecs. I've got to get into Instagram, traffic other ways, but.
Listen, when there's a will, there's a way.
That's why I wear the tux.
I'm very much so allergic to romanticizing the past, even my own past. Like, when I was a kid, everything was so simple. Yeah, because you were a kid. That's why everything was so simple. Everybody did everything for you. And I think sometimes
I got to say I am so far from. For me that was a long, long time ago. And it's funny because I just mentioned O.W. Root. He has this thing where he romanticizes, from an aesthetic point of view, the 70s. And I can tell you, I was there. The 70s was awful. It was ugly. We knew at the time that shag carpet was a disaster. Yes. But I mean, I will say that when we were growing up, I mean, I was, I was born in 1963, so I'm old enough to remember the late 60s when there was all this social unrest.
Right.
And it was distressing as a child. The demonstrations and riots of the late 60s. But at least you knew in those days that there was an establishment that stood by some set of values, and that maybe everyone who had something to complain about may or may not have been heard, and maybe every violent radical act may or may not have been adequately addressed, but at least someone wanted to. Where we are now, I mean, I'm so glad my youngest children are 25, my twins, because I think raising children, especially outside of a community like this, but in the secular world, which is the vast majority of people, in a time of such vast moral uncertainty, where the government is affirmatively not only part of the problem, but really is the problem, it's got to be very, very taxing on parents. You have a daughter?
Son.
A son.
He just turned 18 in October.
Oh, so he's not a little kid. Even 10 years ago was different from what it is now.
Yeah. I agree.
My kids grew up with no TV. No, I was raised by TV.
Me too.
But that was the 60s, okay? Romper Room, Captain Kangaroo. People from the New York area will remember the name of Captain Joe McCarthy. They used to have these shows where there would be some kindly old man who would take on some kind of character, a police, like Officer Joe Bolton. So a policeman, like, authority figures you were meant to trust.
Right.
And they would ingratiate themselves with the children and present cartoons. And these were cartoons that were made in the 20s and 30s. We were watching some really old stuff, which I didn't appreciate at the time. They were black and white, and it would be like this tinny-sounding ragtime music in the background, like these old Popeyes or old Crazy Cats and stuff like that. But by the time in this community, it's understood that children. First of all, people don't have TV. I mean, I didn't really appreciate how central TVs are in modern life.
Yeah.
Because in other words, it's the main feature in every house is the large screen TV. And in our houses, you walk in and you see bookshelves with, overwhelmingly, Jewish books. Doesn't make us better. Well, no, the choice doesn't make us better, but the effect of what we surround ourselves with, I think, does make us better. On the other hand, it's everywhere, I mean, I'm able to make references to TV shows I've never seen.
Right.
The reason I do my own gifts, besides the fact that I'm a ham and I used to be an actor and it's fun, but I realized I didn't know the actors in the TV shows and movies that a lot of these gifts were coming from, and I didn't necessarily know what associations they came along with. Said, "Oh, I'm just doing myself." You're Ron Coleman.
I actually like that you do that. Most people don't.
No, most people can't.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of self-confidence, and you have to override your wife's preferences, but it's become kind of a thing, and I do. It is fun.
But I think you're onto something as far as having books versus a television set. I'll tell you this: I didn't grow up reading books. Granted, I didn't grow up in the cable TV era per se, because that was a little bit later. But like I remember having no cable, the basic channels, but we had a VCR, and we would watch like the same movies over and over. That was basically it. And when cable came, we couldn't afford to get cable. Cable was expensive. So it was quite a while before cable became like an actual thing that we would routinely get.
You didn't grow up in New Jersey, did you? I know that you told me about
I
this.
lived in 4 states before I was 18. Moved to New Jersey when I was in the 8th grade.
So I grew up in Brooklyn. I was literally half in Brooklyn, half in New Jersey. You know, there was a network, you know, there was Channel 2 for CBS, Channel 4 for NBC, Channel 7 for ABC.
Right.
You had Channel 5 and Channel 11, which were independent channel, and there was Channel 13.
Yeah, was it PBS?
Right, PBS. Yeah. And then there was VHS, which was like Spanish, and you couldn't get, and it was nothing. You could hardly get anything.
Right.
And there used to be all these aerials on top of the apartment houses, and everyone had to have his own aerial. Unless you were in a fancy building where they had an aerial for everyone. So everyone had his own aerial. And then, but I had a college roommate who lived in pretty much what you would call Western Pennsylvania. I don't think it's really that far west, but it's not the Pennsylvania we are most familiar with here in the New York area. And the only way you could get TV where he lived was cable. So he had cable his whole life, or for many, many years. And I remember visiting him once during a break from school and seeing MTV for the first time. And it was just astonishing how hypnotic it was, how you could just keep...
Yeah.
And I was already a music guy. I was a DJ in college, you know, and you could just keep watching and watching and watching. And he was a little bit inured to it. But that became everyone's life, watching and watching and watching.
You know, when you put it that way, everybody's just sitting back and watching and not doing.
Yes, consuming culture as opposed to participating in it. I mean, look, in the olden days, not everybody could perform. But on the other hand, you know, it used to be that a normal part of middle class and working class life was singing. People would go to bars, taverns, and sing. Someone would sit down at the piano. It wasn't someone who was paid by, you know, someone who was there that night would sit down and they were drinking songs. And people would sing together. I think that's, except for the Star Spangled Banner, which I guess people still sing at ball games, right?
Right.
It's really unusual for people to sing together anymore. And at least then when you sang, you were participating in culture to some extent, even if you weren't creating something new.
Right.
But I think it was also a really good... First, I love singing. I grew up singing. I went to basically like a singing summer camp. I was in choir in college and choir in high school. And we sing at the Sabbath table. We sing, there are songs that were written by early rabbinic figures that are still sung today that celebrate the Sabbath. And we sing in our services. I guess in church services, people sing, depending on the denomination.
Yeah. I think just about all of them. I mean, how enthusiastically they sing is a different story. But I think just about all of them.
I remember back before I became Orthodox, and I could go into a church because we have kind of a strict rule against going into churches. I would attend these ecumenical services at college. And Princeton has a gorgeous, gorgeous neo-Gothic chapel. Gorgeous. And I remember there would be this kind of responsive, drony singing. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. Like whoever was leading the service would say a verse, and everyone would go, praise the Lord, oh my soul. And I remember it just seemed so plastic to me. But it was ecumenical after all, so that does tend to drain the blood out of almost any endeavor. Look at the size of this.
It's a lot.
You know, and so you and I both, between the two of us, we lost almost 100 pounds over the last year, but you lost it even faster.
Yeah.
You started like 6 months ago, right? Maybe less.
I started in April, doing like the basics, cutting out stuff, but I started doing intermittent fasting in June, at the very beginning of June. And I want to say like in a 3-month span, I lost somewhere around 40 pounds. Like it'd be just like, at the end of the week, I'd lose 5 pounds. Like it was just falling off.
From intermittent fasting.
I was intermittent fasting, I was eating healthy, so I wasn't starving. I was eating healthy, and I was working out. And I was doing that maybe at max 4 times a week. So I was doing all the right things in combination. And then I actually had 2 conferences that I went to. And when I went to those conferences, like you can't control your food because you're not cooking it. So what we said was, we'll mitigate it by fasting. So we would do...
Who's we? You and
my
your
wife and I, we both lost weight. She lost, I think at her max, over 25 pounds. She's a lot smaller than I am, but she fit all her old clothes and she was good. I had a lot more to go. But we both decided, you know what? When we go to this conference, what we'll do is we'll wake up, we'll drink some coffee, because you can drink coffee, black coffee, and we're at the conference, so we're busy. We're not even thinking about eating. And then dinner time comes, then we eat. And we just did that every day, and came home, you lose 2-3 pounds. So we were just finding ways to use fasting as a way to mitigate the weight loss, and especially if we were traveling. You know, so we did that a couple times. We went to Memphis, and we went to Philadelphia for a conference.
So you're saying that for you, the traveling affects the dieting because you don't have control over the food the way you would at home.
Yeah, like even down to the oils. Like you might be, it's chicken or it's fish, but what kind of oils are they using? Because we don't use those oils. You know, so even down to like that particular level, how come when I eat that same meal at home, I don't have the same kind of reaction? It's because all these other little things that they're doing in between. So we had a very, very clean diet. We still kind of do, actually. She cooks every day. She cooks all the meals.
It was about March for me, and I was approached by this guy on Facebook named Yaakov Fine, who was selling me his service. He has a program called Frum Fitness. So Frum is a Yiddish word that means, it's related to the English word prim, meaning proper, right? Prim and proper. Frum means observant, although it can have a with it meaning connotation.
Okay.
A connotation of thinking of yourself as being better, of being frum. But Frum Fitness, he works with men who are Orthodox, and with a special appreciation for our diet challenges and our scheduling challenges, because he's Orthodox also. Right. He's an American who lives in Israel.
Okay.
And at the time I was over 260 pounds. Okay. 5'10". I do have a legit heavy build. My legs are like tree trunks, but this was bad, and I felt bad, and everything. Just bending down to pick something up, you know.
I know.
You were chunky.
I was more.
You were more. You're bigger than I am.
I'm 5'11".
Okay. And I said, you're right. This is a really key point. I said, you're right. What you're saying is true. I really ought to do it. Let's talk after Passover, because Passover is crazy and we have no control over it. He said, no, Ron, I'm going to give you this introductory 3-month thing. I'm going to add another month. And this is not like a salesman-y guy. He's like a quiet, very soft-spoken. Let's add a month. But we're going to start now. Because right now you're motivated. and let's not add another 5 pounds after, from Passover. And I said, okay, you've convinced me. I lost 5 pounds over Passover, and I've lost 40-something pounds.
Awesome.
And it's a combination of watching the calories. I use it. I always resisted this idea. People would say, "Oh, go to a nutritionist and tell them what you eat every day." I'm very self-conscious. I don't want to. I'm embarrassed of what I eat every day. I'm not proud of it, or especially then.
Right.
Well, now I can put it into an app, and it keeps track for me, and it also gives me guidance on nutrition, on balance. So the first thing, as you say, once you start paying attention to what you're eating, you're going to eat better just by paying attention. And here I had, kind of the privacy, but also he got me to work out, which I've never done in my entire life. I used to enjoy playing sports when I was a teenager, but I was never good at it because just didn't have that kind of body. I've never been someone, now I'm in the gym about 4 times a week, sometimes 3, sometimes 5. And the change has been so phenomenal. How I don't feel sleepy all day long, and it's just look. I'm 60 years old. You're not going to start putting on muscle. Just you can improve your tone, but it is so good for the first time in my life to be in shape and you talked about your wife being able to fit into clothes. I inherited thousands of dollars worth of stuff that I haven't been able to wear for many, many years. Some of it is no longer wearable because, people don't wear 3-button suits anymore, all right? But, when you look this good, you can wear your 3-button suits.
That's like the NBA guys. The NBA guys are so fit, they literally feel like they can wear anything. So that's where their blouses and like weird zipper leather stuff, and they think they look great because it's that confidence that you have, even though they look horrendous. Absolutely laughable.
Yeah, I'm often compared to NBA guys.
There you go. Happens all the time. But you're right. It's not just with like dieting, but I feel like it's with life. Mindfulness, being mindful
Exactly.
of what you're consuming, being mindful of not even just food that you're consuming, but the media you're consuming,
Absolutely.
the narratives that you're consuming. One of my biggest wake-up call started a few years ago because I'm a former Democrat. And what made me leave the party was that I just became mindful of the things that I was saying. Like, why am I saying this? Oh, it's because they're saying this. Why am I, like, how does this make any sense? Like like black people can't get voter IDs. At one point in time, I was like, I guess so. But if you think about it, you're like, did you have a problem getting your ID? Do you know any black person who has it? Do you know any person who has a problem? Like, forget black. Any person not able to get ID. You just become mindful, like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So,
my father taught me to be like that, to always only say what you mean and only mean what you say. So I never had that moment except with respect to religion, oddly enough, because I wasn't knowledgeable. He wanted his children, he was not observant, he was not raised observant. He wanted his children to be exposed to get a good Jewish education so they could make choices from knowledge rather than from ignorance.
right.
So then there was a period of my life where I sort of had this basic education and I knew how to say things and but I didn't know why and what they meant. And when I followed it up, I decided that it was meaningful and that it was something that I wanted in my life. But it is an interesting thing that you can be that kind of person or think you're that kind of person, but not be mindful about your body.
Yeah.
And you're going to hell physically. You might be going to heaven spiritually, but that seems unlikely because one of the things our ethical teachers talk about, and one of the biggest praises that you can have of a person who is a highly advanced person in our circles is his deliberateness, and that he doesn't do anything on autopilot. He acts. Now, when you have ADD, that could be a big challenge because impulse control and just the whole. I was watching you set up for our session today. I'm saying to myself, I cannot believe how patient and deliberate Adam is. Like if this were me, I would have just thrown down those 3 tripods, and I'd be screwing them, and I'd be dropping. I've been in a rush because you just when you have that kind of mastery, in the professions you really need to.
Yeah.
That's why I have to surround myself with people who aren't impulsive and that's why social media can be a bit of a, But before I started dieting, I'd eat this whole thing. Okay. Now this is not diet food.
Yeah.
But at least I've got to account for those calories. Okay, so I might not be able to eat much else today. But at least I listened to my body and said, dude, this is a meal for 4 people, at least for 2. Why are you going to keep, because, boy, we can just keep eating. You stopped getting pleasure. And that's what sex has become in our society also.
Yeah.
There's no mystery to it. It's just this gross bodily function and this set of power relationships and cultural postures.
Yeah.
What are we going to do, Adam? I mean, all we can do is have lunch and talk about it, I guess, and do our social media stuff.
I mean, you're right. There's I was talking to someone today, actually, and he was saying how, like, without giving too many details about what he was saying, he was saying, like, he was very suspicious of a particular woman because of how good she is in bed. But I was saying to him, like, doing that is easy. Like, this isn't rocket science. Being good at it really is like, anybody can do it. Like, there are complete morons who could be good at it. It just takes effort, to do it. And I feel like there's so many people who use that. They take the mystery out of it whatsoever. They just give it away, right? They flood the market with it. It's worth nothing. And that's why I think
You mean the availability. You don't mean the technique part of it. You're talking about the availability.
Yeah. Or even just, not even like the actual act, but just the enticement.
Right.
The body. You see everything. Right. There's no mystery whatsoever about what this person looks like or anything like that. And there's something that's very cheap about it. It means nothing anymore.
Yeah.
Yet so many people hold value over this thing that's been made so cheap.
What coin has not been debased in our society? I mean, all the things that So we have a concept in Judaism called Kedusha, which translates as holiness, but what it really, the etymology of the word is held apartedness. Hallowed, in a way, would be a good way of translating it. So we say, for example, that a woman becomes is Kadesh, is Kadesh. She becomes held apart. Really, it means she becomes betrothed in, by this man or that man or the other man. What does it mean? She is now held apart for only one man to be her husband.
Right.
This concept of holding things apart as being better, being separate. Guys like Howard Stern have spent their lives degrading those kinds of concepts. And you get this kind of mentality where people say, what difference does it make to God, this detail, that detail, which can only come from a mentality that has been shaped by an utter lack of familiarity with what divinity means. Because if you accept for purposes of making that crack to me, that God created the whole universe, and that he could do so, and that he does do so, no reason any detail should escape him, and there's no reason that anything should not matter to him. Everything matters to him.
Right.
So once everything matters to him, maybe you begin to think maybe it should matter to us also. And we also look to him for guidance as to what things should be held apart, what things should be separated as special for our own good. Because you as a married man know what a difference it is when you have a special relationship with a special person and there are certain things that are only between you and she.
Right.
People who are out there all the time, like, in a not particularly human and elevated way, are missing out on that. And the Talmud says that a man has a certain organ that the more it eats, the hungrier it gets. And that's what you have. That these desires are never satiated unless you're mindful.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to... That's a fascinating thing to put.
No, it's okay. Closing time. High chairs are a big feature of family restaurants.
No, that's a profound statement, and I agree with that. It kind of reminds me of like the Playboy, right? The guy who's just like a woman every week, but that guy never looks happy.
Well, you know what's interesting to me? Late in my life, I started reading fiction. Much too late in my life, but not some of it better, some of it not so good. And one of the things I started getting into was manly serial fiction, like Horatio Hornblower, and I also I used to be a Cold War guy growing up, as I did in the 70s, and I've been reading all the James Bond books. So James Bond in the books, he has a reputation as a man who sleeps with other men's wives. He readily seduces married women, but he's actually looking for love. And in every book, he falls in love, and he wants it to be meaningful to him. And as often as not, the woman leaves him or something like that. And even though, so Hollywood takes that and just focuses on the Playboy part of it,
right.
And the super seducer kind of part of it. But James Bond was meant to be, even though the entire concept is tongue-in-cheek, it did reflect this idea that even someone like that needs love, needs meaning and real relationships in his life. And it's amazing to me I'm very grateful that I made the decision as I did after college to become observant and to follow the Torah and to focus on a path that is about meaning and trying to separate things that are meaningless and more. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. Although,
Right.
You might have heard this before. There is no word in the Hebrew language, in the ancient holy tongue, for the word. There's no fun. The word fun doesn't exist. There is the word simcha, which means joy. Genuine joy that comes, like I'm making a wedding at the end of February. My youngest son, he's younger than his twin by 3 minutes. So that leaves us with one unmarried, which is his twin. That's real joy. That's real joy. It's real expensive too. But it is truly a joy to be able to incur such expenses.
Right. Yeah, there's something about that. And to kind of go back to the need to want to find love. Like, I guess my issue lately has been with like feminists and then the red pill guys. Because they want you to deny what's in you, right? They want you to deny that feeling of wanting to find love. And they say, listen, I know you feel this way, but don't listen to yourself. Why? Because men are bad or women are bad. They tell each other that the opposite sex, they're actually sociopaths. And actually, even worse, they tell them, in order to succeed in the relationship market, you have to out-sociopath the sociopaths.
Right. Toxic.
It's just toxic way of living. And at the end of the day, no one's happy, right? Because we're
But also,
meant to be with them.
there's a real class distinction here too, because these people are not speaking to the elite.
No.
Amy Wax observed, law professor at Penn, who's going through her own political correctness aggravations, but the great Amy Wax observed years ago that the vast majority of elite members marry and have children and raise their children in two-parent normal households. They may help perpetuate this antisocial toxicity because they think that's what a liberal person will do, but for themselves, they don't choose this way of life.
Right. It's kind of like when someone says, I wouldn't have an abortion, but I don't want to take that away from someone else. It's like,
no, and that is certainly a common enough feeling. You know, that also is an issue of accountability. My father used to say that the pill was, he believed, was the turning point in society. Mm-hmm. But who would dream that we would reach a point where you wouldn't even need the pill because abortion is just as acceptable and presumably convenient. We don't want to go there. That's not my topic as such. Well, it looks like it's closing time here. You know, we're getting in the way of the help. But I'm really glad you came out and that we were able to break a little bit of bread together.
Yeah.
Did you like your fish?
It was good.
You know, whenever I have a friend join me for a meal, it's always going to be in a kosher restaurant. So I always feel I feel I'm responsible for having brought you here and that I have some stake in how good the food is. So you remind me of it. This goes back to way before your time. It used to be that one of the ways you would consume comedy, which we started our conversation with, was through comedy albums. Bob Newhart and Shelley Berman, some of the, Steve Martin when I was growing, and it was always this thing where you put on a comedy record for your friend and then you had now this stake in, are they going to find it funny also? So this is sort of like the comedy record of kosher dining.
Yes. Well, since we have to also get ready to go, one last question I ask everybody. Are you optimistic about the future? Yeah. Oh,
thank you. I'm optimistic that she's going to throw our garbage away for us.
Yes. I'll put it
Am
on.
I optimistic about the future? I am, because I am just an optimistic person.
Thank you.
But I can't really articulate a very strong reason for optimism. I think the systems are broken and cannot be repaired. The things that we talked about today that are problematic it's hard to see how they get better. People are not going to inject faith into their lives. The culture is destroyed. But there is a tendency to lose perspective and forget that the world is bigger than what you're experiencing, and the timeline of history is greater than what you think it is. There have been ebbs and flows of cultural growth, waning and waxing. It might not be pleasant getting to the other side.
Right.
But everything does have a purpose at a time under heaven, as God, as it says in Ecclesiastes. And I do believe that there's a reason that God is having us see all this. And I'm optimistic, not because of the prospect of Donald Trump getting back into office. Frankly, I mean, really, but most people are familiar with me and my takes on government and politics, which gratefully we didn't discuss hardly at all today. I don't think there's hardly anything to be optimistic about that. But God runs the world, and I lost 40 pounds. I feel great. I'm married to a beautiful woman, and I have 4 beautiful children and many beautiful grandchildren. And guys like you bringing up the younger generation and having conversations like this,
Yeah.
we just might scratch out something good.
Yeah. I'm a optimist in general, but I'm optimistic because of people. Because I know so many good people who are around me, who support me, who I see at a distance, who maybe I don't even know, but I see what they're doing. And outside of the politics space, just regular people that I used to work with and been around. And there's a lot of good people who are out there. And I just think that there's this attempt to make us believe that we're all enemies against each other, that we need a national divorce, right? Because we just can't get along. And I've lived in 5 states, mixed neighborhoods, urban, rural, suburban. People get along. You know, that's the progress that our country has made. And I say this also as someone who is Black. And I've been in all different types of circles. And the vast majority of times...
He never told me he was Black.
Surprise. That was the surprise at the end of the movie. No, but just like, I'm optimistic about the future because I've seen the progress. And I've met so many good people. Even now, just traveling and talking to people, there's so much to be thankful for. And there's so much here. But there's that megaphone of negativity, of nihilism, that tells us, no, your eyes are lying, right? And it's coming from the left and it's coming from the right, and they want to engage in this battle constantly. So it's about us resisting that.
Well, that's right. And I'll make another point too, which is related, that I discussed with Michael Malice the last time I had him on, which is he wrote a book called The White Pill. Mm-hmm. He's not a particularly spiritual guy, or at least not in the traditional sense. He's an immigrant from Soviet Union. Soviet Union fell, and he wants to remind everybody that good actually does win out over evil. Mm-hmm. If you will let it, and if you'll appreciate the freedom and liberty that you have. It's a book that I recommend that everybody should read. If Michael Malice, who is really one of the biggest cynics I know, can be that optimistic, we have no excuse.
Right, exactly. So I think we'll take it from there. Thank you so much for having me here.
My pleasure. I'm going to say grace. It's a simple grace that you say after a kind of meal.
I got it down. No, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you inviting me out.
Great seeing you, meeting you in person.
Yes.
And let's talk again.
The Coleman connection. I finally got to meet my cousin.
That's right, yeah. Say hi to Gary for me.
Gary, man, he's a nuisance.
He's a nuisance because he comes up in our damn timeline.
Yes, I know. I was about to say, I don't even think he's alive.
No, I don't think so.
But thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to more good stuff from you.
Thank you.
Cut.